Thanks, everybody. Oh, that's nice. You don't have to clap for me. I'm not the guest. I'm the host. I'm Ricky Camilleri. Welcome to Build. Please welcome Ben Platt.
Hey, everyone.
Oh, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's a crazy day.
It's an amazing day. Your debut solo album. What does that feel like?
Wild. It feels pretty cool and revealing and a little bit scary, but the response has been so beautiful, and it just feels really relieving to finally have it out as a full piece in its entirety. I was kind of anxious about releasing songs at a time because I was really kind of hell-bent on having this be sort of a body of work, and so it just feels really nice that it's all out as I kind of wanted it.
Is it weird to suddenly have your songs be representative of you and who you are? I mean, Dear Evan Hansen, people ask you about those songs, they're asking about the play as a whole, and there's another writer. Now, whether a song is very much about you personally or is a story that you're telling, everyone is going to associate it with your personal life and you.
Totally. That's definitely been the most jarring kind of part of the experience because that's just the way in which I'm sort of stretching that I have never stretched before. But I think I went into this album very much with the goal of trying to share as much of myself as possible and sort of be transparent and as authentic as possible and sort of experience what it's like to not have the safety net of a character or any kind of removal, because that's sort of the only kind of new aspect of singing in this way. And so I was kind of prepared for that theoretically. But it's nice to feel like I have a bit more authority when talking about the songs. I think with Evan Hansen or with any piece that I'm in as an actor, you can speak to the way that you interpret the material or, what you sort of gleaned from it or what parts of yourself you're willing to kind of put into it. But there's always a sort of level of removal of, well, I'm not one to sort of wax about what the project was meant to teach or what people are meant to sort of take away from it. Whereas this, I feel like I can speak about with some authority, which is a nice feeling to sort of be my own creative team.
Do you ever find that there is a level of removal for you, though, once you start performing it or once the song is completed and as a whole? Maybe it's still a part of you, but at the same time, it can almost feel like a character in a way?
I think a little bit, because this is my first experience with original music that's sort of entirely earnestly from my own point of view. And because I haven't had a ton of chances to perform it yet, I've only done like a few sort of showcases and pop-ups and whatnot.
Still very personal.
Exactly. So it still feels like a bit of an event to get up and do that. I haven't really, the sort of fear of that hasn't worn off, but I'm really trying to have that stay around as long as possible, because I think I was very desensitized by the Evan Hansen experience to sort of exposure and vulnerability and stuff like that. So to feel that kind of fear is really exciting. And so I'm
Did you not feel that fear that much on Dear Evan Hansen, though? Because I got Dear Evan Hansen, and it was one of the most vulnerable performances I felt like I had ever seen. I mean, you're spitting, you're thriving, you're flailing, you're all over the place, and you're
Spitting
incredibly
and
emotional.
that's my autobiography, Spitting and Thriving.
Yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah, I thought I said something different, but yeah, okay.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Writhing, yeah.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think
Spitting and
but I liked it better.
great.
It's better. Certainly at the beginning, yes. But because I had like 4 years of development with the character, and because once we got on Broadway, we were doing it for like over a year, it just became very second nature. And so I think any experience that was going to follow that sort of had a sort of big emotional level to live up to, as far as how fulfilling it was for me, because it was such a beautiful experience, and to be able to put myself sort of out on that limb for a project I believed so much in was a really special experience. And so this kind of, I saw immediately, would be an opportunity to lean even further into that and sort of shed that final skin of, because I had to shed quite a few skins as Evan, as far as the vulnerability and such that you said, but I think that last level of detachment from the audience is also gone now, which I really like a lot.
I imagine that if you're a committed artist, it's always about consistently shedding skins and consistently finding out who you are and how to challenge yourself. Is that something that attracted you to this? Was challenge simply just challenging yourself?
1,000,000%. I mean, I think it's not something that I immediately thought when it was brought to me. So basically, I was working on the Evan Hansen album at Atlantic Records, and some of the folks there sort of approached me and said, have you ever thought about doing a solo album? And we would love to sort of invest in you as an artist on your own, as an original pop artist. And it's sort of been a pipe dream of mine to make my own music. But I think I always expected that someone might approach me first and say, why don't you do album of standards, or why don't you do an album of theater covers?
What
or
typically happens to Broadway actors.
Sure. So I guess I never really allowed myself to sort of dream that far, and to feel their faith in sort of not just me as a singer, but me as an artist and someone whose perspective and voice is worth kind of investing in. I think that kind of gave me the fire necessary to give it my best shot and really kind of sit down and in earnest try to songwrite from my own voice.
What was that like the first time you sat down and tried to write a song?
It was weirdly really wonderful, and kind of, I think the way that all of this kind of timed out, there was this confluence of events of having just come out of Evan Hansen and experienced this creative team like creating this piece, and also coming from a family that made tradition out of rewriting pop and musical theater songs for special occasions, like for bat mitzvahs and weddings and things. We would always pick a song and rewrite it to be about whoever was being honored and give it as sort of a gift. And sort of that's how my family kind of bonds over things like that. So I was always fascinated by writing music. And
You knew how to write a song.
yes, exactly. Exactly. I had all sorts of experience kind of hovering around, just sitting down at the piano and writing for my own voice, but I had never in earnest just done that free of, structure or occasion or comedy or anything.
Right, when you showed up with the professional songwriters, you're like, guys, I got this. I've written parody bar mitzvah songs.
It's the
Don't
Brady
worry.
Bunch theme song, but it's about my sister. No, it's no, exactly. So I think I was sort of led as far up to the sort of gate as possible, and then I just sort of had to open it. And once I wrote and saw that I didn't hate what I wrote, then sort of the confidence grew at an exponential level.
Was that quickly, or did it take you, was there a few steps or a hump that you had to get over before you didn't hate what you were writing?
There was a few weeks after I wrote my first song, which was Runaway, which is the last song on the album. This is the first one I wrote, and I just couldn't figure out. I loved it, and I was so terrified that if I let it outside of the confines of my GarageBand on my computer and my piano at home, that I would suddenly hate it. So it took me a while to send it to anyone, and then I sort of forced myself just to take the baby step of sending it just to my mom, and then like just to my best friend Beanie, and then just to maybe like one person at Atlantic who I'd been talking to, and sort of slowly but surely checked in with myself at each step and thought, do I still love the song regardless of what other people think? And thankfully each of those people felt really strongly and really enjoyed what I wrote, and I kind of eased myself into it in that way.
What was your process? Were you like, okay, I have to write a song. I'm going to wake up every morning and start writing. I'm going to just mess around on the piano until I find a melody. Or would you sort of go walk around and wait for something to come to you and try to, hope that the muse sort of struck you?
I think it varies greatly dependent on sort of what it is that I'm choosing to write about. I think in the beginning, it was very much started from a place of conceptually, what do I feel passionate enough about that I want to write songs about? And when I first started discussing making this album with Atlantic, my mind immediately started working as far as what are the experiences and emotions that I feel like could be processed well by writing a song about them? Because I felt like, coming from the world of musical theater, my way into songwriting has always been what situation needs a lift from normal communication, so much so, whether that's emotional complexity or intensity or something about it requires that you sing about it. So I sort of had a lot of those ideas floating around and put them in this notebook that I have, and landed on the sort of the one that I felt could musicalize sort of that I could really hear first, which was sort of this idea of my parents' relationship and like the sort of example that they had set for me as far as longevity and steadfastness and trust and all of that. And with that in mind, I just spent a few days sort of tinkering and playing and finding, you kind of land in those 3 or 4 chords that you find yourself enjoying and playing, and you end up playing them over and over again, and then eventually that evolves into something a bit longer, and then a sort of a narrative kind of appeared, and then it kind of went from there.
Was there a song that you wrote? Because I believe you had written 40 songs or something by the end, and you put, what's the final track count now? Excuse me?
12.
12. So there is 28 other songs. Were any of those songs that were too personal to share, or things that you were kind of like, okay, maybe I shouldn't put that one out there?
I don't think so. I mean, I think in the end we ended up loving the ones that felt the most honest and the most specific, because I feel like universality usually comes from that kind of weird specificity and idiosyncrasy. So there wasn't really any particular like subject matter that we didn't want to use. It more just became, A, what was cohesive, and B, what songs felt like the strongest, and also there were some that were just kind of weird that I didn't want to put on there. But
Weird how?
Like, there was this song called Newness, which, as in, like, the newness of something, like the fact that something is new. And it was all about how I loved the newness of a relationship, and that's the thing I liked about it. And then realizing through the song that I didn't really like the relationship itself, just the fact that it was new, which was an interesting idea, but everyone thought it sounded like I was singing nudist. And they were like, why are you singing I'm in love with the nudist? And I had no response, so I cut it.
Were you... When they gave you that criticism, did you take to it right away, or did it take you some time?
I mean, thankfully, it wasn't like on my list of must-haves. I thought it was pretty good, but I was happy. I think it wasn't like if it had truly been like a spectacular song, I think I would have found a way to explain like it is newness and found a way to enunciate. But maybe it'll make it onto the second record.
Chorus of the song. The chorus should have been, "It is newness." I can try to.
That second syllable really just You cracked it.
So what do you do with those other 28 songs?
They're sitting in a box folder on my phone, and I...
If anybody wants to hear them, come up to the stage. No.
Just hang out. You know, I view them, some of them as just really beautiful hallmarks of days that I spent with great collaborators writing something, and, you know, some maybe will end up on a future record because I do love some of them, and some could be used by the collaborators I wrote them with for other purposes, and... but yeah, they're sort of floating in this kind of nebulous space at the moment. But I love to go back and sort of listen through and just kind of remember the occasions of writing them, because it's such an ephemeral thing, particularly when you're being paired with songwriters and you're meeting them on the same day that you're writing something, which was a lot of the case here. I mean, luckily I ended up meeting people that I connected with and then working with them very consistently, and that's where we got some of my favorite songs.
Who were your collaborators again?
There's quite a few throughout the album. The most sort of frequent collaborators were, one of them is, his name is Ben Abraham, and he's a really talented Australian singer-songwriter in his own right, and he and I wrote Ease My Mind together. He was one of the writers on Bad Habit. He and I and a really talented writer, Alex Hope, wrote Grow As We Go together. He and I and a very talented writer named Johnny Price wrote Temporary Love, so he's on quite a few of the songs. And then there's a pair of writers, Michael Pollack and Nate Seifert, who were my partners on Better and In Case You Don't Live Forever and Older. So I ended up finding some grooves that I really loved, but then there were a few songs that were sort of unicorn moments, I suppose you could say. Like Hurt Me Once was with this really spectacular writer, Francis White, who goes by Egg White, which is the coolest name of all time. And he is this fellow, he's based in London, and he wrote Chasing Pavements with Adele for her first single, and I'm so in love with that song, and so I just chased him down and wanted to work with him so badly, and we worked together for one day for 8 hours, recorded the song on that day, and that's the song that's on the album. It hasn't been fixed or touched since that day. And so I sort of loved the kind of combination of things that had a lot more kind of shaping and things that felt really kind of in the moment and ephemeral, and vocals that were captured on the day of writing.
Was there ever any pressure put on you, either by the powers that be or you put on yourself, to have any of the songs sound similar or more similar to Dear Evan Hansen, considering that was sort of like what was your showcase to the world originally?
Yes and no. I mean, more so the pressure was just like put Waving Through a Window on the album, because I think people just really refuse to let that song go, which is great. I love it. It's a beautiful song, and I'm so proud to be the one who got to introduce it to the world with Ask and Paul. It's less about, I think, Evan Hansen specifically, and more the sort of an internal pressure to veer from musical theater as drastically as I could. I think at the beginning I felt like I really needed to push myself away in any possible way stylistically, but then I think, and certainly not from Atlantic, they were very much allowing me to lead the way creatively, very much to their credit, but I think as I started writing and realizing sort of what my strengths are and what my sound was, I realized that there were aspects and philosophies and sort of pieces of my sort of upbringing in the theater that were very useful and that made the songs more emotionally complex and more narrative and allowed my voice to have a better showcase. And I think when I stopped sort of shying away from those things just in favor of trying so hard to veer is when I found kind of this medium middle space that I think is very much my own.
Where you thrived in.
Yes, where I thrived and writhed.
I found with Dear Evan Hansen that the songs veered away from musical theater for the most part as well. I thought that show sounded so much more like a sort of late 90s pop rock soundtrack, which is one of the things that I loved about it. This doesn't necessarily have that sound, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're hopefully getting to a point in general where there's a bit more crossover with things like Evan Hansen and Hamilton and Greatest Showman and all that, and I think the word musical theater, there's so many different sounds that now fall under that umbrella. It doesn't immediately mean like Rodgers and Hammerstein, like Golden Age, throaty vibrato. It can mean a bunch of different things. I think that it's more just sort of an aversion to like the emotionality and earnestness of it, and that is so much of who I am, and so that was going to just be inherent in the work no matter what I did. And I think obviously stylistically I wanted to bring in the things that I'm passionate about, like a bit more of soul and a bit more sort of singer-songwriter, Carole King, Adele kind of a feeling. But I certainly didn't want to shy away from kind of the intensity, both literally, vocally, and emotionally, that might equate itself to theater.
Can I ask very broadly, what is, if you can talk about it, what is Grow As You Go about? Because the video is very emotional. The video is basically, I mean, with the exception of the storyline going on outside of the shot on you, it's a shot of you singing till you essentially weep by the end of the video. So clearly that song means something very, very deeply personal to you.
It does. I wrote the song while I was in a relationship with someone who who meant a great deal to me. I really cared a lot about him, and still do. We're still very good friends, and we're in very different walks of life. We had different ages and we lived in different places, and we just. I could feel that there were a lot of places that we weren't managing to converge, and that we had a lot of personal growth still to do. And I knew that he knew that too. And I think I thought back to all the times in like film and TV and everything, and in real life, when people often use, whether or not it's a cop-out is dependent on the situation, but the reason for a breakup or a dissolution of a relationship is often, I need to go find myself. I need to go stand on my own 2 feet, figure out who I am, and then I can be with someone. And I just thought to myself, I'm sure there are scenarios in which that is the healthy thing to do and the correct thing to do. And in this particular situation, it ended up being what happened. But I think I found that sort of frustrating, that idea, and I wanted to write a song in the position of someone who's sort of been sat down and told that by their partner, and then in response, as sort of a rebuttal, is saying, I hear you, and I need to change too. I have a lot of growing still to do, and I understand that you want to find out who you are, but please explain to me why we can't do that sitting here next to each other, and why I can't give you space when you need space and you can give me space when I need space, and we can grow in tandem and also apart. And I think the reason that it makes me so emotional is because I really did believe that was possible, but I think in this particular case, it just really wasn't. I mean, I think it was just, we needed to go and figure out who we were, but I would like to think that there are relationships that it is possible. And I think what's been beautiful about seeing this response to this song is that there are people really on both sides of that responding to it, as far as people who view it as a really melancholy experience and can relate to the pleading of it and the eventually sort of dissolution of the relationship. And there are people who feel that they are in that relationship where they feel like they have been able to grow on their own and with their partner. So I think that's why maybe it's been such a beautiful, particularly to that song, response, because I think there are 2 ways in.
For a second, I thought you were asking me. It was great.
Well, we could talk after, but...
I'm curious, how do you walk away from a show? I'm sure you've been asked this a lot, but how do you walk away from a show like Dear Evan Hansen? You said it was like 3-4 years that you were with the show. It becomes the calling card of your career. You win a Tony Award. I'm sure doors opened up all over the place because of it. When it's time to go, obviously you know that there's other opportunities waiting for you, and you sort of have to go as a career move. But what is it like saying goodbye to this thing that, you gave so much to it, and it gave you so much as well?
Definitely was difficult because as you said, it defined, a lot of people's perception of me and sort of opened countless doors and just changed my life really in every way. But I was really fortunate in that there were several ways in which I just had no choice but to leave. And so the sort of preparedness came along with that. And one of those being, I had this beautiful opportunity to start working on and investing in, as well as The Politician, which is the show that I'm working on with Ryan Murphy for Netflix. And then in addition, I physically and emotionally felt that I was at a point where I could not sustain the performance anymore. I mean, I wanted to leave giving the full performance still. I didn't want to stay and for my own health have to start giving sort of versions of that performance.
And that's true, because the 4 years that we're talking about have like long breaks in between, because you're doing the show as a workshop somewhere else,
exactly,
then months off, and then somewhere else.
Exactly.
On Broadway, it's just going to be going.
Exactly. So I did 13 months on Broadway, and at that point, it was sort of like, all my fellow castmates were staying, and of course, there was the part of me that's thinking, this is one of the greatest experiences I'll ever have, and but it really felt to me like I didn't want to have to army crawl out of the building. You know what I mean? I just wanted to leave with all my limbs and all of my vocal cords intact, and leave feeling like I had really been able to give 100% to every performance, and not tarnish that experience in any way. And also, as you said, sort of career-wise, it just, as soon as you lean too far into something like that, it becomes really hard to work your way out of it. So I think I really felt that it was time to start using that experience to branch out. And
What was it like taking your last bow?
very emotional. It's on YouTube, thankfully. It's immortalized for all to see. But the thing is, I cry a lot at the beginning of it, and then there was a real kind of relief, I think, and a real kind of acceptance, because I think I really tried my best to prepare for the moment and to process it all that week and all that month, and because I really knew for a long time when that last day was going to be. And I kind of cushioned the blow by planning a karaoke party right after, where I just like very purposefully shredded my vocal cords.
What did you sing?
Crazy, Gnarls Barkley. I did a lot of Celine, a lot of Whitney, without changing any keys. Some Britney. And then spent the whole next day binging Stranger Things and eating Panda Express and pizza. So like I was just, because I was like living this monkish lifestyle for so long that the relief of that really cushioned the blow of like it being a very emotional ending.
It's weird when you live a monkish lifestyle for something you expect like the day it's done, you're going to like go on party with friends or something. Like, no, I'm just going to watch TV and eat the worst food possible.
100%. I'm just going to eat like gluten and acid and dairy and sit on the couch and scream.
Has it been as fulfilling for you going from doing something that was that intense, that kind of lifestyle, to doing television? I'm sure the show is wonderful and the writing is wonderful, but it's a lot of stopping and starting. It's a lot of hurry up and waiting. It's not an hour and a half of just a straight shot.
Totally. I mean, theater has always been sort of my first love, and I think, with film, there is even more of that sort of distance as far as it being, like you said, a very stop and start experience and a much more sort of piecemeal thing that is then curated after the fact for you, which is not my favorite thing as an actor. But I think coming to TV in this way with Ryan, where I was able to be an EP with him on the show and really be involved from the beginning and from the ground floor the way that I was with Evan Hansen, and feel like I had some sort of creative ownership over it, all the while sort of playing a character that was very new and challenging to me, and additionally with a family of a lot of other actors that were my age and were my contemporaries, made it feel a lot more like a theater experience, because it was, in theater you make these like families that become incredibly tight, and you kind of start a routine, and because we knew that we went in knowing we'd be making 2 seasons at least, so we knew that we would be spending a lot of time together and living with these characters for a long time and developing them for a long time. So even though the day-to-day is still much more filmic in the sense that it's you visit a scene once and then never again, it did feel more congruous and more kind of bond-worthy. So it was a nice middle ground.
Together and working together.
Totally.
Yeah. I think we have time for 4 questions. Who's the first of the 4? Hi, right here. You can just ask.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah.
Thank you for all you've done.
Thanks.
Between Broadway, movies, Netflix, you've truly done it all, and now you're telling your own story. You touched upon the vulnerability, but what are you hopeful for, and what do you fear the most?
Oh my goodness. Wow. What am I hopeful for?
Your biggest fears.
Well, I'm going to start with hopeful.
All right.
I am hopeful that young people are really smart and that young people know what's up, and that hopefully young people will fix the mistakes of some of our older officials, and that there's a lot, and I'm also really hopeful with this album in particular that people are really craving something honest and something authentic and something that is meant to be sort of I'm sorry, I've been up for so long. It's meant to be what's the word? Like it's not eaten, but like meant to be
consumed.
Yes, consumed. Yes. Oh, thriving, spinning and thriving.
I should have been on that faster.
That's okay. That's okay. We're spinning and thriving. That's meant to be consumed in a much larger way than just little bits at a time. I think because a lot of music is very sort of moment-based and hook-based and quick bites and things like that. I think people get really discouraged from kind of leaning into like the emotionality and earnestness of things, but I think it's been really encouraging to see how many people are really craving something that isn't trying to sort of be suave or cool or sort of, apathetic, because I'm none of those things at all.
You're cool.
That's very nice. So I'm hopeful in that sense. What I fear the most, I mean, like the end of the world because of climate change, for sure. But I hope we can maybe fix that, maybe. And also, I think I don't know. I mean, I think I fear getting to a point where I can't, as an actor, what I fear the most, or as a performer, is getting to a point where I can't find things that create that sort of fear that I was just talking about, where I feel like I'm being stretched in a new way, or I feel like I'm being challenged, or I guess I feel sort of a stalemate. And I hope that I'm fortunate enough that doesn't happen.
Next question. Right here. Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry.
That's okay.
So I know you have your music videos and everything, which I loved, by the way.
Thank you.
But what track from the album do you think could be on a soundtrack for a movie, and what do you envision happening in that scene?
Ooh. Well, for the record, any song in any movie would be great. That's a great question. I've always thought of New as a great song for a movie, and because in my mind I always see it as like, it's a very vindictive song, which is why I really like it, because everything else is pretty tender and pretty from a place of kind of vulnerability, and that song is a bit of a like, thank you next kind of a moment. So like, I always saw it as like, you know, somebody like packing up their stuff and like running out on their lover, or like, you know, getting in the car with like a very sepia toned like Western moment and just like driving. That'd be sick. Maybe I'll just do that for the music video, actually. Never mind, I'm just gonna do that for the music video.
One more question. I think we have one more. Hey.
Hey.
What was... Hi. Anyways, what was the experience while writing the album? Yes, I think that's the question, yeah. What was the experience process while writing the album?
Just in general?
Yes.
It was long.
Really?
It was 13 months. I got to meet a lot of amazing people, a lot of amazing writers that I became very close with, and learned a lot from, as far as how learning about being a songwriter, because that was the thing that was the newest to me. And it was the most kind of amorphous process I've ever had, because I think when you're making a film or a piece of theater or a piece of television, it's very structured and you're sort of fitting into a preconceived map, whereas when you're trying to create a bunch of music and create a record, there's much less of a schematic for it. So I felt a lot of freedom in that sense, but also a bit afraid of how boundaryless it was. But thankfully, I think it turned out pretty well.
I think it did too.
Thanks.
It's called Sing to Me Instead. It's out today.
Today.
People can listen to it. Ben Platt, everybody. Let's
Thanks,
hear it.
guys.